My name is Madison Clark, and on most days, people look at me and see only the polished surface, the sleek navy suit, the subtle pearl earrings, the calm voice that never wavers in boardrooms filled with men twice my age. They don't see the scars. They don't hear the echo of a single sentence that once split my world in two. "I gave your research patent to your stepsister," my father said. "She deserves it more." Even now, years later, the words sting like ice pressed against bare skin. I stand in my office on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in New York, the city stretched out before me like a kingdom I claimed in secret. My silk blouse clings lightly to my shoulders. The faint hum of traffic below mixes with the low vibration of my phone on the desk. I glance down. A name flashes across the screen. My stepsister, Claire. I hesitate, my manicured nails tapping once against the polished mahogany. We haven't spoken in years. I don't need to answer to know what this is about. They finally know who I've become. And part of me, petty, wounded, but still human, wants them to see it with their own eyes. I was 22 when it happened. Back then, I wasn't sitting behind a mahogany desk overlooking Manhattan. I was a graduate student in Boston, living on instant noodles and black coffee, scribbling equations on scrap paper because I couldn't afford proper lab notebooks. My research was my heartbeat, long nights spent over data, the rush of discovery, the thrill of knowing I'd created something no one else had. A patentable breakthrough. My breakthrough. And then, one Sunday afternoon, I came home to find my father waiting at the kitchen table, Claire sitting primly beside him, her glossy hair shining like she'd stepped out of a magazine. I remember the lump in my throat as he cleared his voice. "Madison," he said, folding his hands, "I gave your research patent to your stepsister. She deserves it more." The words didn't make sense at first. My ears buzzed, my vision blurred. I'd been working 2 part-time jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, pouring every ounce of myself into that project. Claire had never stepped foot in a lab. But there she was, sitting in her pastel dress, smiling politely like she was being handed down a family heirloom. I felt my hands trembling. My voice cracked when I whispered, "It was mine." "You're too emotional," my father replied, his tone clipped, as if ambition in a daughter was a flaw. "Claire will represent this family better than you. You'll understand one day." The humiliation burned hotter than fire. Later that night, I sat on my narrow bed staring at the tiny silver locket my grandmother had given me before she passed. "Never forget, Maddie," she'd said, slipping it into my palm. "They can take what you build, but not who you are." I clutched that locket so tightly it left a mark in my skin. That was the night I decided I was done waiting for approval, done begging for recognition. I packed my worn leather backpack, stuffed my notebooks inside, and walked out. My hands were still shaking, my heart still shattered, but beneath the rubble, something solid had formed. Resolve. I was going to build a life no one could take from me. The first year after I left home was brutal. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat in Queens, the kind of place where the heat clanged like old pipes groaning in pain, and the smell of detergent lingered through the vents. My desk was an overturned milk crate. My bed sagged like it had lived 3 lifetimes before me. Still, it was mine. I spent nights at my laptop until my eyes blurred, reworking designs, emailing professors who had once encouraged me, begging for introductions. Most never replied. A few did, and that's how I met Dr. Evelyn Hartman, a retired professor who had seen me present once at a symposium. She called me in for coffee, listened to me ramble through my half-finished ideas, and instead of dismissing me, she leaned forward and said, "Madison, you've got the mind of an innovator. Stop apologizing for it." It was the first time in months I felt seen. Under her mentorship, I started refining my research. She helped me apply for small grants, the kind most people overlook. I stretched every dollar, working nights at a diner just to keep the lights on. I remember serving greasy burgers with a forced smile, then running back to my apartment to sketch designs with ketchup still under my nails. Self-doubt was my constant shadow. There were nights I broke down, staring at bills stacked on the counter, wondering if my father had been right, that I was too emotional, too reckless, too female to handle the weight of ambition. But then I'd touch the silver locket around my neck and hear my grandmother's words again. And slowly, little by little, wins began to trickle in. My first grant approval, a modest $5,000, felt like a miracle. My first prototype worked after months of failure. I cried alone in my kitchen, clutching the device like it was a newborn. My first investor meeting ended with a handshake and a promise. I kept my success quiet. On social media, I posted nothing but the occasional photo of coffee or a sunset, never the long hours, never the breakthroughs. When Claire's posts popped up on my feed, her glossy selfies, charity galas, my father beaming at her side, I scrolled past, lips pressed into a thin line. They thought I'd vanished into obscurity. Good. Let them. Over the years, the prototypes became products, the products became contracts, and the contracts became a company. I hired people who believed in the vision, people who didn't care that I was young or a woman or someone with scars. Every success was a brick laid in silence, building something far stronger than the patent they'd stolen. One night, a decade after I'd walked out of that kitchen, I stood in my own office, real mahogany this time, not milk crates, signing a deal worth millions. Outside the window, the city glowed, and I realized I hadn't just survived. I had built an empire. And no one, no father, no stepsister, no dismissive voice, had the power to take it away. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Claire's name lit up my phone again, and this time, curiosity got the better of me. Madison. Her voice faltered, almost fragile. Dad and we'd like to see you. We're in New York. For a moment, I nearly laughed. 10 years of silence, and suddenly they were in my city, asking for my time. I agreed to meet, though not at a cafe or restaurant. No. If they wanted to see me, they would see the truth. That Friday, my father and Claire walked into the lobby of Clark Innovations, unaware that the name carved in brushed steel above the reception desk was mine. I watched from the mezzanine as they stepped inside. Claire wore another pastel dress, though the gloss of her youth had dulled. My father's shoulders slumped, his hair grayer than I remembered. They looked around the marble lobby, confused but impressed, as if they'd wandered into a world that didn't belong to them. Right this way, my assistant said, leading them to the executive floor. I waited in my office, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Manhattan skyline, shelves lined with awards and patents in my name. The mahogany desk gleamed under the soft lighting, a vase of fresh lilies filling the room with their subtle perfume. Every detail, from the leather chairs to the abstract art, was a quiet declaration. I made it without you. When the door opened, they froze. Madison? Claire whispered. I rose slowly, smoothing my silk blouse, every inch of me composed. Welcome, I said, my voice steady but warm, as if I hadn't been carrying their betrayal like a stone for a decade. My father blinked, struggling to catch his breath. This is your office? No, I replied, letting the silence stretch before the reveal. This is my company. I gestured to the plaques on the wall. Every patent you see there bears my name. Every contract signed in this office is mine. The empire you assumed I was too emotional to build? You're standing in it. Claire's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes flicked from the polished desk to the skyline beyond the glass, as if searching for proof that this wasn't real. My father finally found his voice. Madison, we didn't know. If I'd realized. I cut him off gently, but firmly. You did know. You just didn't believe. The room fell into a heavy silence. I walked closer, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor, and stopped in front of him. You thought you were taking everything from me when you handed my patent to Claire. But all you did was teach me I never needed your approval. You built me into exactly what you feared, a woman who doesn't ask permission. Claire's eyes brimmed with something between shame and envy. My father looked down, his hands twisting together like he was searching for excuses, but finding none. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the trembling girl at the kitchen table. I was the woman who had built an empire from the ashes they left me in. And they knew it. I let the silence linger, savoring the weight of it. For years, their voices had drowned mine out. Now, My words filled the room, and they had nowhere to run. Claire finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Maddie, I didn't ask for the patent. Dad pushed it on me. I thought you'd moved on." I tilted my head, studying her. There was a part of me, buried but not gone, that wanted to believe her. But the memory of her smile that day at the kitchen table still burned. My father cleared his throat, trying to summon authority, but his voice cracked. "Madison, we came because, well, Claire's project is struggling. Investors are pulling out. We thought maybe you could advise. Or help." There it was. Not reconciliation. Not apology.
Need.
I leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing my arms. "Help," I repeated softly. "After telling me I wasn't enough, after stealing what I bled for, you want my help?" His eyes dropped to the floor. I exhaled slowly, then spoke, each word deliberate. "If I help, it will be on my terms. No more entitlement. No more pretending Claire deserves what she didn't earn. She starts over, at the bottom like I did. If she wants success, she'll build it with her own hands, not mine." Claire's cheeks flushed. "You want me to start over? After everything?" "Yes," I said firmly, "because shortcuts rob you of grit. And grit is the only thing that lasts." I turned my gaze to my father. "And you? If you want a place in my life, it won't be as a critic or a puppeteer. You don't get to decide who I am anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it comes with respect. Period." His face crumpled, pride warring with shame. I softened my voice, but not my stance. "You both thought you were protecting a family legacy. What you did was destroy trust. If you want to rebuild that, it'll take time, humility, and honesty. No more secrets. No more stealing what isn't yours." Claire swallowed hard, nodding, though her eyes glistened with tears she tried to hide. My father gave a stiff nod too, but I saw the weight of it in his slumped shoulders. I stood tall, sliding my grandmother's silver locket between my fingers. "I don't hate you. I don't even wish you harm. But I will never again let you dictate my worth. If you want me in your lives, you'll meet me here, on equal ground, not above me." The words hung in the air, sharp yet merciful. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. And for the first time, I saw it in their eyes. They knew the power had shifted forever. Weeks passed after that meeting, and for the first time in years, my phone buzzed with messages from Claire that weren't polished or perfect. Instead of gala photos, she sent me late-night texts filled with frustration about learning things from scratch. "I burned through 3 prototypes today," she admitted once. "Turns out grit is exhausting." I smiled at the screen, not unkindly. It wasn't schadenfreude, it was recognition. She was finally tasting the fire I'd been forged in. My father, too, began to change. He called one evening, not to lecture, not to command, but simply to ask how I was doing. His voice carried something I had never heard before. Humility. "I was wrong about you, Maddie," he whispered. "I should have believed in you." The words didn't erase the past, but they softened edges I thought were carved in stone. Still, I kept my boundaries. My office was not their playground. My success was not theirs to claim. What I offered was a bridge, one they could cross if they chose to honor it. One night, alone in my apartment overlooking the glittering skyline, I unclasped my grandmother's silver locket. Inside was the tiny photo of her younger self, smiling with that same fierce glint in her eyes. I traced the edges, remembering her words. "They can take what you build, but not who you are." She had been right. They tried to take the patent, the recognition, even my confidence. But they could never take me. I closed the locket, letting it rest against my heart. For so long, I thought the story of my life was about what was stolen. Now I see it clearly. It's about what I built anyway. And as the city pulsed below, I whispered the truth that had carried me here. My worth was never theirs to give. It was mine to claim.